Okay, hello, welcome back to DocFest Exchange. As people are getting used to now, this programme and series of talks is programmed in collaboration with the Wellcome Trust, a global charity that supports not just researchers, but creatives like filmmakers and game makers to do great work. And so what better place than DocFest to have conversations around some of the films that have been screened here. And today we're fortunate enough to have Pierre Liebeck and the director of There Will Be Water, and Bill Watts from the Sahara Forest Project, who features in this film and is kind of the lead character, to have a conversation about their film, There Will Be Water. So we're just going to screen the trailer for those who might not have seen the film, so you have a sense of what the film is about, and then we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to come to you, Pierre, first. So just thinking about this film, I wondered how you uncovered the story and how you found Bill. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, back in 2009, I was filming in Copenhagen during the climate talks, and it was a kind of a depressing situation. So I think back then I realized I wanted to do a film about a project with a positive possibility. So that was kind of in the back of my head. And then I was doing other stuff. And 2012, there was a small article in actually a British magazine. It talked about Norwegians turning the desert green. And I just said that sounded like a utopian project, and got me curious. So I contacted the Norwegians and had a chat with them, and then realized that there was a lot of possibilities, but they said, we haven't built anything yet, we don't have any money, and we don't have any places to build yet. So I said, okay, that sounds like it's gonna happen. But I started filming them because it sounded very promising. And soon after that happened, they actually got funding to start building in Qatar. And along the process, then Bill showed up on the scene because Bill was part of that project. So their project is a combined Norwegian-English effort with English technology, you might say, and then Norwegian environmentalists who have access to the money. And I was following I didn't quite know, I wanted the lead character in the film. And actually Bill just, he walked on stage and the camera kind of just immediately just started pointing at him. And like I was saying yesterday at the Q&A, it's because I put mic reports on various of the people when we were on site at first. And one thing I noticed was that Bill, he was talking to himself. And so he was walking around and he was, you could just immediately sense that he was excited about, little things. And is there something that is interesting to film? It's people who are excited. So his excitement rubbed off on the camera, and I realized by him talking to himself, it would actually give me a possibility to kind of, enter into his mind, and so be inside the mind of a creator and an interesting engineer. So he stole the scene from the rest of the guys.
So, Bill, coming to you, I wondered, at what point were you aware that there was this possibility of a film being made about your project, and were you aware that of Pierre at this point?
There was. I'm very grateful to our friends in Norway, Joachim and Ketil and Frederick, for getting things up and running. And the publicity and the sort of that side of things, I was kind of left to them. And then it became apparent that there were a number of exciting things happening. And one of them was that the Copenhagen Film Company would like to film this process. I thought, well, fair enough. I mean, I didn't really think anything more of it. And then Per started to appear with his big cameras and everything. And we went out to meals together. And I remember you didn't trust the Norwegians. You made sure you knew where the camera was at all times in the restaurant. But anyway.
We should say, actually, that Ulrik Gutkin, the producer from Copenhagen Film Company, is in the audience. I wanted to focus a little bit on the big idea and make sure that people have it really clear about what it is. Because the first time I watched the film, I was a little bit, oh my God, this is a crazy idea. The second time I watched the film, and you see the possibility of what you're trying to achieve, you start to see really, actually, this is quite a simple idea. And it has been tried before, but perhaps not in the way that you've tried to pull it off. So if you could tell us something about this idea that you're having to green the desert, and what does that mean? What were you trying to achieve with the project?
The technologies aren't, they're not new, they're established, but they're just getting better. The issue of the lack of water in certain places in the world is known. There are two ways of dealing with that. You either capture the water that's falling from the sky more successfully, or you bring more fresh water inland. And that you can do the desalination by the coast, or you can bring the salt water inland and do the salination inland using solar energy that you get from the desert area. What is interesting for us is that as part of the desalination process, you get brine, which is more concentrated salt water at the end of it. And you can use that for cooling. And that's the trick that we're pulling off, is that we're bringing seawater inland, we're making use of the fresh water that we produce from solar desalination to irrigate high-value crops and things like that. But we're using the brine to cool greenhouses. So the greening is within greenhouses. There's a somewhat more subtle issue of how do you green the area around that. By providing shelter and managing the rainfall and managing and providing some irrigation to the external areas, then you can start revegetating the external area.
And why the desert? Why was the idea to go to the desert?
Well, that is where you've got a lot of solar energy. And if we're going to solve the world's other issues to do with energy, then you go to the place where the resource is the greatest. I mean, in Sheffield here it's raining, and so it's rather difficult to get enough solar energy to drive things, but in desert it's a bit more reliable. So it's basically, that's an area which has got maximum resource, and also they tend to be rather they're resource constrained, but also that impacts on the population there, that they tend to be quite poor. So providing investment and roles and livelihoods, it has a social benefit as well.
And I wondered, Pierre, so being kind of invested in, your disappointment at the climate talks in Copenhagen, and then with this project that there's this potential solution, and as a filmmaker, there's potential of lots of drama here because so much could go wrong. In making the film, there must have been moments at which you're kind of conflicted because, no drama means no story.
Actually, yeah, the drama was slowly unfolding before my eyes, but it took years for the drama to really unfold. You could say in the film you follow closely the building of the first pilot site, and that has its own drama. You might say, is it possible to? That was a tight deadline for them, so that's it's a very good thing to start filming if there are somebody who's building with a deadline, because then they will be pressed for time, and that will give situations that might be a bit tense. So that was a given. But then, as I was filming them over that course of those 7 months when they were building, I also I didn't just want to stop filming after they had built it, because that was the idea I had, was I wanted to film a project that really had the potential to create an impact. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see more. I mean, so they built it, and it was successful. It was hugely successful, and it got a lot of press coverage, and everybody was really happy. And then it's like, and then what? So I wanted to see more. And then you might say, for me as a filmmaker, it was painfully slow, because they say it was moving fast. It took only 3 years for them to build it and get the funding for the next stage. But when you have, when you have a camera in hand and you're waiting for something to happen, and it just takes a year, or it might take 2 years before something happens, then you know.
And what are you doing in that period? Are you making other films? Are you thinking about other projects?
Well, you don't just sit on your hands and hope for something to happen. You're kind of, first of all, I kept phoning them, phoning Bill, phoning the Norwegians, like, guys, do something. And then in the end, I didn't get the funding myself for their project, but I did other projects for myself. Yeah. So that's why also the film has been it's been 4 years in the making, because I was waiting for something to happen specifically in Jordan.
I wondered, thinking about the funding of this project, so one interesting thing, the Wellcome Trust, who sponsored these talks, with their researchers, you can do public engagement, so you can make films as part of what you do, you can get funded, you can get broadcast funding to make films. I wondered how much was that considered as an option to fund the film, or would that have been kind of muddy waters? Thinking about, it's not just a film that's communicating this project, but was that something that was considered, that the funding could come out of the actual Sahara Forest project?
No, because we were, this is film that is made as an independent film. So if you want, you get embedded and you start making communication films for them, for their project, then you kind of, you lose your integrity and your own. So it was quite obvious and agreed that the funding that they were looking for, because they were looking intensely for money, all over the world, basically, a lot in Norway, that we as filmmakers shouldn't go for the same funding, because we wouldn't want to be competing, if the Ministry of Environment in Norway gets 2 applications. One is for a couple of million kroners for a project, and another one is for a film. They're like, who are we going to support? Okay, let's support the film. And then they probably would get a bit upset with me. So I had to look for funding, that weren't competing with their funding. But we did a Kickstarter campaign, which kind of helped us get it going. But
and I think Ulrich was saying that the Kickstarter campaign, at what point in the process did that come?
That was actually quite early, you might say. Earlier and earlier. I had been filming them for, I believe, 6 months, just with the camera and no funding. But then once you get tired of using your own pocket money, of flying to Qatar back and forth, you realize you need other funding than your wife's coffee pot. So we did the Kickstarter campaign, and that was actually very good, because it also, once you do a Kickstarter campaign and it's successful, then you're obligated to finish the film. I mean, because a lot of projects, they kind of you get involved in, they don't happen because you don't get the funding, etc. But we got the funding, and in the Kickstarter campaign, we said this is the last money we need to get the film funded, which was kind of a bit of a twist of the truth, because it was actually some of the first money. But we just thought it would be easier for people to get involved if they thought, because we had made that obligation to ourselves, that if this money goes through with Kickstarter, we will realize the film regardless, and even if we would have gotten no further money. So it was an obligation. You get the Kickstarter funding, the film will happen, and it did. And we then fortunately we got funders like Danish television and Norwegian television and various private organizations to pitch in. So helped.
Hooray for Europe, Brits! Hooray for Europe!
Yes.
And Bill, kind of on your side, I'm thinking about the first time you saw the film. So we heard from Pia that you were excited about this project. What was your experience of first seeing it?
First seeing the film?
Yeah.
I think I didn't really think about being... There was an initial thing about being filmed, and I kind of got over that. But actually seeing something is another matter, because that took a long time before. It was the trailer that I first saw, and it was a bit of a shock, but I guess you get used to it.
You seem remarkably calm. So there's a moment when your phone to say, and I think you're in England, and you hear that the fans, there's been a failure and the fans don't work. But you seem a very calm person on camera. So there are all these incredible challenges. The heat. What for you was the most difficult challenge in perhaps the project, but also thinking about the filmmaking?
I ignored the filmmaking, to be perfectly blunt. I mean, that wasn't my concern at all. the challenges of the project were things that you came across issues, and in a way, having ownership of the problems makes them better in a way. That there wasn't somebody else to, I knew that it was going to get resolved, and I could, generally speaking, put more time or effort or money into something, you can sort it out, and it's nothing is insuperable. Well, on that project, it wasn't insuperable. We were very fortunate in having support that allowed us to do that. So it wasn't, you never got into life or death issues. To be honest, the main issue for me was how hard everybody was working, and what effect that was going to have on people when they're working from 6 till 10 at night.
And how hot was it? Just give us a sense of how hot it was in Qatar.
Well, it was 40 to 45 during the day in the summer, and so we worked at night. Well, some of us worked at night, and so it dropped to sort of 32. But at least you didn't have the sun. But when people work at night, some people have got to work during the day to keep communications going with other people who aren't working at night. So you end up working this 24-hour cycle, which is quite tiring. But the thing about going out there, I think it came out in the film, that you don't realise how important drinking is. And you're in all the urinals, you get a P chart that tell you if your urine is this colour, you can drink more. It tells you no uncertain terms you've got to drink, and you take that. You just sort of, there's a certain, hey, we don't, those rules don't apply to us sort of thing, which they certainly do, but they apply in a way you don't understand, and dehydration creeps up on you. You don't feel thirsty, but after a day you just feel awful, and it takes 2 or 3 days for you to get out to rehydrate, and it's odd. So anyway, those.
So knowing the science behind that, you still kind of, it took a while to acclimatise yourself to realise, you had to feel it.
You don't. The science behind it is a bit. Well, I certainly didn't know it, and I guess I know it now through. But it was, healthy people say you should drink lots. And you think, well, all right. But yeah, it's quite subtle what dehydration does to you, and you don't initially link it to the fact that you haven't drunk enough.
I mean, in a kind of interesting way, sort of that in thinking about climate change and the way that you've wanted to make this kind of a film. We've seen lots of climate change films and environmental films that are raising awareness of the challenges, but they don't kind of focus on the solution. But there's this opportunity for, actually showing the possibility of innovative solutions, just to get a sense of how effective this film you feel has been, and what kind of audience responses have been as you've gone out and screened the film.
Well, it has just been premiered. It was had the premiere on Saturday, second screening yesterday. So the response is still
starting
to feel. But I mean,
so what's your ambition?
Well, my ambition with the film is, of course, to raise awareness, especially of the people who are doing the actual work. I mean, it would have been, I could have had the film focus a lot more on the actual water crisis and the water problem, which is, of course, is severe and not really that. Well, I don't think people think about it in England, but it's really happening around the world. A lot of studies show that it's a massive problem. NASA just did a huge study showing that half of the world's aquifers are being depleted, and it's really a huge issue. And the film could have focused much more on the crisis of that. But I didn't want to have a film. There are a lot of films out there that focus on the problems. I really wanted a film that had the focus of a potential solution and the people working to do something about it. And I really liked one thing you said in the film was that I asked you, so what about how severe are the problems that we're facing in the world? And you said you don't focus on on the crisis at hand, because it's just a distraction from getting on with the work that needs to be done. So, and I really like that statement. You said it much more better than I can quote it, but you said it like that. So let's not just focus on all the, because when you open the news, and you see the papers, it's really depressing. Either it's about terrorism and the stupid fuckers doing that shit, and then it's it's the climate problems. And it's really depressing. So it's like you almost lose the interest to read the papers. So I definitely wanted to do a film that had more of a positive twist without being, naively positive, because of course Bill's project alone won't save the world, and it's not like it's gonna, just by doing this it's gonna have ended the water crisis. But to have a little bit of a positive twist that it's possible to do something if you really focus on your energy on finding solutions instead of focusing on what's wrong with the world.
There's an interesting, I know you're up for an environmental jury award for this film at Sheffield. There's another film, Age of Consequences. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but that takes another approach altogether. It looks at the complexity of the challenges of climate change, and takes the security angle. So it's kind of aiming the film at the Republican audience. But what's really interesting about it is that towards the end, it starts to talk about what can we do about it. And watching that film, this is really fascinating, because I watched your film again this morning, but coming away from that film, I thought, well, actually, this is an infrastructural problem, and we need engineers to kind of get on with what needs to be done. And so your work and the film is kind of highlighting that. And so I think it's a really positive that we're starting to now talk about innovation and solutions, and that this film is showcasing that, and Bill's work is just, as you say, getting on and doing it. But tell us a little bit about what next. I'm going to suggest for the audience to be ready with a question. But so what next for the Sahara project, the Sahara Forest project? What next there? How's it spreading? What are the possibilities?
Okay, just on your your penultimate point about the engineers and infrastructure and things like that, it's you do need. I think we do need infrastructure, but you can't put that in blind. It needs to be done in a way that is, what's the word, consensual, in a way that is that people understand and they want. So that once you put it in, it's going to get used. Because there are lots of projects where, for one reason or another, some investment has been put in, and it doesn't meet the needs of the community, or it meets needs of some of the community, and it becomes a white elephant. And
how are you working that into your project? So is it a co-design project, or how are you getting that citizen community engagement?
Well, I mean, that's politically, we're developing it. As you see in the film, we're getting very high-level buy-in from political organisations. Now, I think the trick is, so that's tick. We've got that done. I think now that the issue is to get that engagement further down into the population. But I think our boast, if you like, is to bring it's a more educational project, and it's a capacity building project. Yeah. So that aspect of it is incredibly important to us. And the grower, Steve Clarkson, who you saw in a film, his passion is, well, he's got two passions, well, three. Growing stuff, which is a given, and then growing stuff without pesticides, so pesticides free, so that's a sort of healthy thing. And then thirdly, capacity building. He loves teaching people. And the Nepalese workers who come in as sort of minions, are all dressed in blue and completely anonymous. What was really good is that he picked some of them out and said, well, come and learn how to be a grower. And within 6-7 weeks, you could see that passion had been transferred to them. And I think by doing that, you build. We haven't worked it out yet, actually, but certainly not what we don't want to do is to just go along there and say, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't quite worked out how we're going to do it, apart from we built the high-level support, and then it's a matter of working it down.
So what you're saying, has the potential to be a social movement as much as a kind of environmental aspect of that environment, you know, being able to realise the environmental movement. There's a social element to it that can be built into what you're doing.
Yes, I think that engineering does have that capability. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but the walking from one end of the greenhouse to the other in 45-degree heat through sand was just awful for me, being rather unfit, and, you know. As soon as we'd just made the ground firm, actually walking 50 meters became so much easier. And you think, that's what roads are about, that you've made life so much easier just by doing something that everybody can benefit from. And in a way, that's what I see. Would you call putting roads and railways in as a social movement? I don't know. I mean, it's what I'd like to do is to put in the infrastructure so that development can happen at a sort of at any scale.
Well, and it can also provide jobs. I've got other questions, but I think it'd be great if we could take a question from the audience, if anyone's got a question. No? Have another think. So another question was just about, you talked about the challenges of the project in extreme heat. How was that with you and filming?
I prefer filming in extreme heat over filming in the rain. So it was, you know, the cameras doesn't mind the heat if you take care of it, and so I was really. You asked me before the challenges that I was looking for in the film. It was just, you know, every time it was a hot day and you could see that the guys were sweating and it was hard on them, it gave me energy because it showed in the film. So it was, so I would say for me it was just a positive part of the film.
And so what next?
So what next? Sorry, come back.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about to start building in Jordan. The equipment that you saw in Qatar has been packaged up, shipped up, and put in containers, and has been moved to Jordan. So we're going to be re-erecting that in Jordan, along with another greenhouse that we're having built locally, and that's going to be ready by the end of the year. We're doing a study in Tunisia, and hopefully, I think we want to miss out the sort of pilot stage of 600 square meters, and want to go straight to 2 hectares or 4 hectares of greenhouse. So you get into the commercial aspect of it, which demonstrates the business side of things. So
what size was the pilot?
The pilot was 600 square meters,
okay.
And of an advanced European-based greenhouse. So it was incredibly productive, but it was a little bit too small to be a full-on commercial project. So you really need to get up to 600 meters squared. So 2 hectares is 20,000 meters squared.
And why cucumbers in that?
Why cucumbers? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we wanted to have a cash crop. So that's cucumbers, peppers, tomatoes, salad crops, things like that. We chose cucumbers purely as a commissioning crop, if you see what I mean, just to test the greenhouse out. Yeah. The point about cucumbers, they grow like crazy, very fast. So if we completely screwed up, which we did once or twice, they regrew very quickly. So when we get confident in all the systems and the engineering, then we'll invest in the lot. With a tomato crop, if you kill it all, you've lost 6 months, so that's bad.
And what next for you, Pierre? What's next?
I'll just become a father.
Oh, congratulations!
So I'm kind of focusing on right now, but lately I've been filming a lot, actually, in a completely different place. I've been filming a lot in the Amazon. which is I think I might be directing my energy towards that area. But it's linked, and also because a lot of the Amazon is being deforested to create place for agriculture. So that's the biggest reason for deforestation in the Amazon is you want to produce soy fields. So if you can focus on the deserts and start producing agriculture in the deserts, you might stop cutting down the Amazon. So actually it's very linked.
Any questions? Oh, we've got one. We've got one back here.
How did you find Kickstarter? Any good tips for the rest of us trying to get support for our films on there?
Well, actually, we started with Kickstarter when it was not really ready for Denmark. So it was a terrible experience, actually, because at that time you couldn't pay on Kickstarter you could only pay with PayPal on Kickstarter. PayPal is not, at that time, readily used in Denmark. So I had so many of my friends calling me and say, I would love to put in $25 or something like that, but then I have to spend 15-20 minutes to get a PayPal account before I can put in money. So if my friends, they said, we don't want to do this, I just imagine, the regular audience. So I think we lost out a lot by doing it that way. So I would have done it differently at that time. But now, 4 years later, Kickstarter have done it differently in Denmark. So, but one thing you need to have tons of small clips and stuff ready so that you can just keep putting stuff in the. It runs for. We had it running for 30 days, and you
What were your rewards?
Rewards were credits on the film.
Which happened, I saw that.
Yeah, we definitely credited people on the film. So it was mostly credits and stuff like that.
Another Kickstarter tip that I noticed from some artists in Manchester, future artists, they were opening up a space, a kind of coffee shop that creatives could come along to, and they did a great thing. They had a launch party and they invited all of their investors to come and meet, and they were quite local. And in meeting their investors, they got further investment. And they'd said, we would like you to help us to make this project happen. So that's another tip, is to have a kind of thing where you invite your investors to come and meet you, and they surprise you and say, well, I could cover your insurance, and I could do this, and I could do that. So more Kickstarter tips. Any more questions?
I was going to ask sort of the people that were local to the greenhouse project and stuff like that, did they have any issues with you building it? Like with wind turbines, people didn't like the appearance of it. Was there any issues like that?
Thank you. Well, where we built it in Qatar, it was on a petrochem works. There are no locals there to worry about it. Certainly not from an aesthetic point of view. In Jordan, generally speaking, the places that we are welcome whatever's going on, and it's this. Quite often, we need to go out of our way to make sure that we're not doing anything bad, that the local people might overlook, if you see what I mean. But in the interests of getting investment and things like that into the space, that it's exactly the opposite. Actually, they'll say, "Come along and sort of put some nuclear waste here because we need the money," sort of thing. And you need to you've got to make sure that your credentials are maintained to an international audience, not just the local one. So we haven't had that sort of thing in the places we are.
But I remember you told me actually that in Jordan that you went out to the Bedouin community who live in the deserts, asking them about their opinion, what will happen if we build greenhouses in this area. And they were quite surprised that you actually asked them. They said normally they don't get involved in the decision-making process. So here you had some people who actually wanted to know their opinion. So I think that was a...
That's right. And if you ask ecologists, what do you think about Bedouins and ecologists, they're surprised to be asked. Normally, they're involved in a mitigation process. Say, we're going to do this, just make it okay. And it's actually quite tricky because they don't know what being creative about something rather than saying, you mustn't do this, is a different skill set. And what's the best way of doing it if we are going to do it is it's much more creative and not often done. In Urava Valley, it's just an example of how you need to be fairly humble when it comes to these things. That when I came along, I don't spend much time in deserts, and they just all look the same. They're sort of, hot and and sandy. Well, that's very far from the truth. They are very constrained and unique ecosystems, and and the Urava Valley, as it happens, is a globally unique ecosystem, and you have to be very careful about developing it. So when you go along and say, I'm going to green the desert, well, that could drive out some unique species that are only there. Because if you water everything and make everything lush and green, there are some very specific species that are adapted to that particular environment which would drive away. So, it might not be the locals, but the particular spider mite that you would object.
I love it that you've brought that into the conversation. You, in the film, you say engineering is all about designing for complexity, and to talk about the ecological impact of your work and to build that in is fantastic. Unless we've got any further questions, we're going to close the session in the traditional way and thank both Pia and Bill for coming and talking about your film. Wishing you the best of luck with getting the film out there. Use your Kickstarter audience to get it wider. I'm sure they'll probably love to screen it in many different countries. Congratulations on the film. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.